Hi there. This is my quick, much-delayed review of House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 8. I didn't make it at the time, not out of disgust, but because we were all confused at suddenly getting the confirmation that Warner slashed their budget and literally cut off the last two episodes. We didn't realize what was happening until they really did it. Warner did that to the show. This was not the showrunner's decision, though. This is something that Warner CEO David Zaslav did to them. And even then, news was coming out one day at a time, you see. So I thought, I'll make a review a little later. I'll make it a little later. I'll make it a day from now when we know more. I'll make it next week when we know more. 1 week turned into two turned into three, and then Martin made his blog post in September, a month later. We didn't know what to think. So, because so much time had passed by then, it didn't make sense to make a review of this, because there was this big crisis going on that they chopped off the end of the season. All the problems behind the scenes. Now, I am dashing this off quickly as an audio-only podcast, unedited, right before Season 3 actually starts. This review of the last episode of Season 2, just for the sake of saying I technically made one, because looking back, it'd be weird if I had this empty slot in my playlist that I skipped a full episode. So, this is just for the sake of having it. It is not really meant to be this definitive analysis. We've said everything we could say. Now, I also didn't make a post-finale full season overall review. There were supposed to be two videos for the finale, as isn't really a finale, as an episode, and then looking back on the whole season, which is what I did for Season 1. Now, it's hard to separate one from the other, admittedly. The central reason so many people review-bombed this episode on IMDb and other things was to voice their frustration at the real ending getting cut off. And I understand that. How else would you display your disgust at what the studio did? But it isn't the fault of this specific episode. For people saying this episode in isolation is as bad as Season 8, like, no more than the other weaker episodes of Season 2 in the middle, like Episode 5 or even Episode 3 or something. That is a macro-scale problem that isn't really tied to an episode review. There's a difference between a season complaint and an episode review. So, I'm splitting that off into its own separate video talking about that. And I am going to delete any comments on this video that are not directly reacting to the points that I bring up that are specifically about this episode in isolation. Yes, we know it isn't the real ending. Yes, we know it does not really function as a season finale on its own. This was a terrible point to stop on. They didn't have a choice. Remarking on that is just shooting fish in a barrel. Now, if you do want to talk about that, go over to the video I'm loading at the same time, which is about Season 2 as a whole, the Season 2 as a whole review. This is about things that happened in this specific episode. The way I do it is I make 7 main points that stood out about something. So limit your comments to the 7 or so things I actually discuss in this, even if you disagree with me. Just, okay, I'm reviewing what happened in this episode alone. All that preamble out of the way, and again, I'm not editing this, it's just for the sake of having something out there at all. The 7 main points I took away from this episode. Point 107. Ulf buzzing King's Landing on Silverwing in the previous episode, which that doesn't happen in the book. That was actually explained in this one, directly. Some people question that. You see reactors going, why is he doing that? On the one hand, they do explain it directly in this, but thinking on it, it will probably cause ripple effects later. That you even see in this episode is having ripple effects with Aemon that wouldn't have happened. That They state that Ulf didn't just impulsively buzz King's Landing. Rhaenyra sent him to do that as a show of strength. They wanted to lure him out to Dragonstone to show, I have 3 new dragon riders. I just basically doubled the number of dragons on my side. And they're big dragons. Before we had Moondancer, Vermax, or Juveniles, these are the bigger ones too. That she thought luring him out to show, I have these 3 big new dragons, would, as a show of strength, frighten him back into a defensive posture, maybe even willing to negotiate. Instead, Aemon panicked and burned an entire town in his rage. Now, in terms of plot mechanics, it makes complete sense. They covered their bases on that with its own internal logic. But how will things play out differently now that Aemon knows Rhaenyra has doubled the dragons to her command? Like, in the book, he didn't know about them, so he was willing to leave King's Landing with a skeleton defense force and fly north on Vhagar, shadowing Criston Cole's army. It takes about 2.5 weeks for an army to march between King's Landing and Harrenhal. It takes like 1 day for a dragon to do that, but he was shadowing their army so he could defend them from Caraxes. It's not that far. He's willing to leave for maybe 2 weeks. Oh, no, they wouldn't attack. They don't have enough men to take and hold the city. He didn't know. They'll have so many dragons that the defenders would be overwhelmed and give up, basically. So they're going to have to address, how do we get Aemon to Harrenhal, which we know he will because we've seen the trailers for Season 3 already at this point. They'll have to come up with an explanation for that, but that's for my Season 3 reviews. That is an issue raised. It's not a fault of this episode on its own. Point 2 of 7. I actually really like the character arc they had Criston Cole on across this entire season, which really culminates in this episode, that he started out cocky and self-assured, but after witnessing dragon warfare, it's the medieval analogy for nuclear warfare, that the good and the bad are all destroyed regardless. What do our delusions of morality and consequence even matter? Culminating in this great scene where he gives this whole speech about it. This was amazing writing and amazingly acted. So people going, oh, this is terrible writing. Yes, there were problems with they got the ending cut off. There is great dialogue even within this episode. Great scenes even within this episode, scene overall. Criston waxing philosophically about the existential point of anything when we're all facing total destruction. So, great stuff here. I really like that. Criston Cole actually had a pretty solid season overall. Point 3 of 7. I have no strong feelings on the Daemon vision scenes or Helena predictions. No strong feelings one way or the other. They didn't really impress me. They didn't add anything. Nor did I hate it. Like Preston Jacobs' Red Team review really didn't like them. I was like, oh, they're mildly pleasant, but they added nothing for me. This wasn't a huge draw. Then again, of course, I've seen TV-only fans really excited about, oh my god, we're seeing Daenerys briefly. Well, yeah, but in context, would it make sense? Some complain they're trying too hard to tie it into the other show. And at times they are a little, but I think they should make some efforts to tie things together. Like, it was a smart idea in Season 1 to explain there's actually this secret prophecy we've been handing down. It's why Rhaenyra would want to keep the realm intact. All of that. They weren't wrong to do it. I just think at times they were a little heavy-handed, and it should flow a bit more organically than they've been doing it. It's not wrong in principle. They just dial it back a little. And they probably shouldn't have had Helena just flat out spoil so much of the story in her conversation with Aemon. Just, oh, this is what's going to happen. And, wait, what? I'm not really sure why they did it like that. So, overall, with people going, oh, these vision scenes and predictions and everything, I have no strong feelings on it. If they thought this was actually really improving the story, it wasn't. And I don't know if TV-only fans actually really liked it a lot. Whatever, I'm really neutral on it. And if you're neutral on something, you probably shouldn't do it. You should only keep in what's really adding something a lot. The other thing is we know they filmed a lot more than we actually saw in terms of visions, that the actress they hired to play Daenerys, seen from behind, so we can't tell it's not really Emilia Clarke 15 years ago, that actress on her Instagram said she filmed a lot more scenes, and she posted photos of herself. She even had an exact replica of Dany's iconic Season 1 wedding gown from her wedding to Khal Drogo and Pentos that we never even saw on film, that they intended quite a bit with that in terms of visions. And maybe they were just meant to be quick flashes in the final version, we don't know. Tied to point 3, of course, that the actual visions and things didn't really do much for me, is point 4. That, don't get me wrong, point 4 is, I really like Alys Rivers and the fact that they showed us a green man in this episode. That on the other hand, I do like the magic stuff they're doing with Alys in general from across the entire season. Now, people complain, oh, the Harrenhal arc. We loved Harrenhal stuff in episodes 3 and 4 when this was first airing. That the middle of the season was poorly paced in episodes 5 and 6, and people point to Harrenhal because of that. No, that was a symptom, not a cause. That the Harrenhal scenes were a victim of these pacing problems in episodes 5 and 6. That's an episode 5 and 6 problem, not a Harrenhal problem. Alys has had some pretty interesting scenes throughout the season, and in this episode in isolation, I think she was still interesting. Of, oh, I'll show you visions of stuff. Not a bad idea in general principle of where they're going with this. That Alys Rivers could have easily been a Melisandre knockoff. Like, they didn't really define her that well in the book, let's be honest. But instead of this sorceress from a foreign religion, they really played up that witch aspect. They had to pretty much come up with that on their own. The pagan magic of the old indigenous religion, that she's unlike Melisandre, this foreigner, she's really tied to the arcane old pagan Samhain and all of that stuff, of the native stuff. I think a lot of book fans, if you're anything like me, were giddy at actually getting our first glimpse of a Green Man in live action. And I like that they played it mysterious. That they had the restraint to do that, of just Daemon, he's not even sure what he saw or if he saw anything. It was dark, he was behind the weirwood tree just for a split second. The Green Men are these mysterious, satyr-like creatures from the hidden Avalon-like magical island in the middle of God's Eye Lake, the Isle of Faces, which they've talked about a lot in the book. You can tell it's going to be important, but we haven't really seen anything of yet. Harrenhal is on the north side of the lake, and it's more or less the heart of the Weirwood network. So I like it. They're just hinting that, hovering at the edge of the story, you have Alys apparently in league with, or in contact with, the Green Men. That they're akin to the Children of the Forest. We're not really sure what their relationship is, if they're like an offshoot of them, or what's going on with that. Some people argue that no, they're people, that I've actually seen some other YouTube channels arguing they're not satyrs. What the hell is the show doing? And like, I always pictured them like that. But it just goes to show you how little we know about them, how little has been revealed, where in the book it goes, well, it's said that they have antlers, but some people think they have hats, so we don't know. Wonder where that's going, and it actually makes sense to start setting them up, because in Fire and Blood, the book, there's a point later on where it says this one character, according to legend, they say he was going around the Riverlands looking for allies with his dragon, and even went to the Children of the Forest, that they say he even went to the Isle of Faces to seek the counsel of the Green Men. So I actually think this is them setting up something they're going to do in Season 4, which is from the book, so good for them that we genuinely did not think they would include that, even though it's in Fire and Blood. We thought, that they're going to cut that out, and then no, they are going with setting up that a character is going to meet the Green Men. I am pleasantly surprised. 0.5 out of 7. I actually like the world building, just because I'm really into world building stuff. I like the world building that we actually got to see Tyrosh, where the Triarchy Council is meeting. That, yes, as a season finale, it doesn't make sense to be introducing a new location and characters. This isn't the season finale, this is episode 8 of 10. But I was excited, just they do a good job with all the costumes, and the set design, and set dressing of physically looking at it is interesting, of showing it is different from Westeros, and you get a different feel for it. And I actually think they did set it apart from the other free cities. This is the 4th free city we've ever actually seen in live action. We briefly saw Pentos, then Bravos and Volantis briefly, but okay, this is the 4th out of the 9 free cities, and to be honest, the southern ones aren't like the whole thing no one wants to admit is that Lysmere and Tyrosh are relatively similar to each other, hence the Triarchy, but okay, I was excited to see, it's the 4th free city we're getting to see, and they actually kept, like, the detail that it's the heart of the color dye industry, so a lot of them dye their hair in bright colors. There's mercenaries with bright blue dyed hair. That's a thing from the book. So in terms of world building, little details like that, I liked that we actually got to see Tyrosh. One thing I'm a little concerned about is that the Thailand actor explained that was not a CGI monkey, that they had an actual monkey on set just to show, it's this foreign bazaar and everything. And we've had so many stories about monkey attacks. You don't work with live animals like that. They could. I'm uncomfortable with working. I think they're dangerous animals. So, and he even said, like, they were saying all these safety things like, don't glare at the monkey. It'll think you're trying to attack it. So I wouldn't have done that. And it's not like it's not like a chimp or a gorilla, it's just a trained monkey. Like Raiders of the Lost Ark had a monkey in it. Still, working with live animals and stuff. One of these days, we're going to see a show in Volantis that has elephants in it. God damn it. Maybe not a real elephant. Maybe a CGI elephant. But I want my damn elephants. Anywho, 0.5. I appreciated that we saw Tyrosh and the world building just in terms of set design, costuming, that kind of thing, and they were decently acted scenes, and it's nice they were actually making Thailand his own little POV. 0.6 out of 7. The big scene of Alicent meeting Rhaenyra is a big change from the book, and while not hating it out of hand, I can feel the hand of the writers, is the way I put this. That we needed to have a big acting scene between the two leads, and it feels a little inserted. Don't get me wrong, the scene in isolation has great acting, even notably good cinematography, depending on how the conversation is flowing, and the specific dialogue, the writing is admittedly good in terms of dialogue, and the pacing and everything. The issue is that it's pretty clear this is a big change to Alicent. This is a macro scale issue, that it's not totally unprecedented to me, and we'll talk about this more, that Alicent in the book is not one of the more Warhawk Greens, that both her and Otto wanted to win an easy coup without the need for a bloody war where they'd lose a lot of their own people. That when Aemon kills Luke, he's proud of it, and they're horrified. You idiot! We don't need this. So I can kind of see how you'd build up for TV drama, that there's internal divisions of the Greens, and Alicent kind of wants peace. There's a point later on where the war stalemates, and she pleads with Rhaenyra, can't we just divide Westeros in half, partition it between the Blacks in the north and the Greens in the south? There's a kernel of basis for this in the book. Admittedly, it is not what the book. This is a divergence from that, but I can kind of see how it grew into this. That if nothing else, at least on a season scale, this is consistent with TV Alicent, that they made it a point to gradually show her season 2 character arc of getting increasingly sidelined on the small council until Aemon just flat out kicks her off altogether. That she's getting sidelined, they are ignoring her, and then he just plain kicks her off. In terms of plot mechanics, and for a TV-only audience, I can see how we got to this point. I'm just not really sure what arc they have planned for her. This is a wider scale thing than one episode. And I hope that Alicent turns back into opposing Rhaenyra in Season 3. The reason I wasn't that angry at this scene is I thought, oh, this is just setting them up to fail. That Alicent pleading, no, we can fix everything, I can still be your friend and everything, is, the rule of drama of the unspoken plan guarantee that they're setting this up to be tragically ruined. And I get that. Or at least following the rules of TV, that's what should happen, depending on if they're good writers or not. So when other people are freaking out that, no, they're really going to have this go through, Alicent's going to remain Rhaenyra's close ally through the end of the series, I just honestly didn't get that feeling, so that's why I'm not angry about it. That Rhaenyra and Alicent have got sort of a TV Rhaenyra and Alicent, a Professor X and Magneto vibe. In X-Men terms, Professor X and Magneto, this frenemy tension where it doesn't work if they're full allies, nor does it work if they're full enemies. That they used to be friends, they have some shared sentiments, but they fundamentally disagreed on something and are divided over it. That doesn't change the fact, no matter what happens, even the things where Magneto's just a straight-up villain don't work. That there's that frenemy thing going on. It results in the tension that makes drama more than if they were straight-up allies or enemies. We need that tension back. That's what made Rhaenys work in the first place, the tension. Of course, the enemies to lovers kind of ends as a trope, ends when they stop being enemies. That's kind of what the chase is. So no, they need to be enemies. It needs to be longing for a friendship they don't have anymore. So my suspicion is that they were planning that, and because it was intended as a 10-episode season, this would have been ruined by the finale when we think, when Rhaenyra takes King's Landing, Aegon isn't there. That was the other big reason I wasn't worked up about this, oh, they're really going to be allies, is you could tell in this episode, in isolation, watching it cold, without even seeing any interviews or anything, Aegon fled King's Landing. Their deal hinged on Alicent handing over Aegon. So logically, when Rhaenyra gets there and Aegon's gone, she'll never trust Alicent again. So because of that, I never really thought, oh no, they're going to stay friends. They will be divided over that again. Now my hope is because Emma Darcy, they've made so many comments about it, people weren't paying attention. Wow, season 3 is going to be really dark. It's Rhaenyra's villain turn. That I don't know if people will even like Rhaenyra anymore. Based on the book, I can see that my hope is Rhaenyra gets increasingly ruthless, and this alienates Alicent, who is the one arguing for peace. We have to stop this. What are you doing? You're descending into villainy. Combined with doesn't trust her anymore because Aegon was gone. The Rhaenys and stuff, it should be a tension, but it is weird how many people thought this was actually going to happen, because it had to step up to serve as the climax to season 2. Like at the last one, the way they play it with editing and everything, because it was not meant to be the final episode. So there were some upsetting things in this episode, but I will end with point 7 of 7. Much like how, I like the Criston Cole thing. Alan calling out Corlys for ignoring him as his bastard son was one of the best scenes in this entire series across both seasons. This was amazing writing and acting, a standout of the entire show, and in the moment reaffirmed my faith in the midst of big production problems and online toxic clickbaiters that, no, reaffirmed my faith this franchise is capable of delivering the human scale drama we came for. Not fate of the world high fantasy, not even necessarily gritty politics, but grounded human drama, in family relationship drama like that. This scene isn't in the book at all. It's entirely invented by these showrunners, Condell and Hess. Sarah Hess is credited as the writer of this episode. There is good dialogue in the Criston scene, in the Alan and Corlys scene. These are great, entirely invented scenes. So people say, oh, this is as bad as season 8. There are macro scale problems with the entire season, and you might take issue with that. They're not the fault of this episode, but I'm not the only one saying this. Everyone who actually made episode reviews at the time said, for people hating on this is somehow drastically worse. This is a good episode and a terrible finale. And it's weird how people can't mentally separate. It was never intended to be a finale. It literally got cut off, and maybe it's the whole the big lie thing that when something is so ridiculous that it's unbelievable, but it really happened, that I think people weren't willing to accept something. It was an outside context problem of, you mean people couldn't accept that Benioff and Weiss were really going off the rails and would not make a good ending in the later seasons. They were looking forward to season 8 because how could they possibly go bad? This is the best show of all time. How could it fail? The idea that the studio would literally cut off episodes 9 and 10 during a writer's strike of one of their flagship shows is so unthinkable that I think a lot of people were genuinely doubting if that's what really happened. And it shocked all of us, because when I saw episode 8 was the first time I realized, dear God, that's really what happened. But then you saw other reviewers who were like dismissive of the suggestion of it, going, oh no, well, I kind of think maybe the writers intended to do this. Absolutely not. That this is what really happened. It was that ridiculous. The studio cut the ending off. This is not the showrunner's fault, Condell and Hess. And my hope is that in season 3, because they said we just pushed episodes 9 and 10 into season 3, you will see that, and it'll be more obvious, and people stop yelling at them that this really was the studio screwing them over, and it is not their fault. I don't know, but please follow me after the jump into my thoughts on season 2 as a whole, not just this episode.